Do you know why a ship floats and a stone cannot?
Be silent. I have not passed through fire and death to bandy crooked words with a witless world.
As I predicted, Amazon's show failed to present the Númenóreans as a legendary race of superhumans. They just look like a bunch of normal, modern people. In the Silmarillion, they were described as the most elf-like of men, taller than the tallest of the sons of Middle-earth, and the light of their eyes was like the bright stars. When they visited Middle-earth, the lesser men they met revered the memory of the tall sea kings, and when they had departed called them gods. And Elendil surpassed even the other men of Númenor, being 8 feet tall and ruling for over 100 years, his reign ending when he died in battle, while defeating Sauron at 322 years old. The superhuman stature and longevity of the kings of old demonstrates Tolkien's adherence to the traditional doctrine of degeneration from a golden age, as found, for example, in the Sumerian king list, which listed kings with reigns of thousands of years. Elendil is a sort of Gilgamesh, an ancient post-Diluvian king of divine lineage, greater in stature and might and nobility than any other man. By giving such characteristics to the High Kings of Númenor, Tolkien provided a mythic background for the Lord of the Rings, and a divine and legendary lineage for Aragorn and the Dunedain Rangers, as shown by the reaction of the men of Gondor to the news that the Sword of Elendil had returned. You will find this kind of legendary backdrop for the heroes in many heroic epics. Achilles was the mightiest warrior of his generation, and yet the king Nestor told him that even he,
so mighty a man as he
was no match for the warriors of old. Theseus, peer of the immortals, godlike Polyphemus, these were the mightiest men ever born upon this earth. Not a man now living could withstand them. This is the function of Elendil in The Lord of the Rings. He's the Theseus, the legendary king of the past, mightier than any man of the Third Age, founder and progenitor of 2 royal dynasties. His name is Aragorn's battle cry, and his sword is the symbol of restoration. And what does Amazon do with him?
Suppose Elendil here is a runic emperor.
Had a lord, actually.
His people are scattered, leaderless.
When you have a character who's a legendary king, is it too much to ask that he not be treated as comic relief? The Hobbit trilogy showed more reverence for Thorin Oakenshield than Amazon did for Elendil, even though Thorin was not much of a legend in the book.
And I thought to myself then, there is one who I could follow. There is one I could call king.
Elendil is the nexus of the legendary past in The Lord of the Rings, and Amazon gives him this line.
The past is dead. We either move forward or we die with it.
Was that an accident?
It was deliberate.
And just as the descendants of Elendil looked back to him, Elendil looked to the future, to his heirs. It's difficult to imagine Amazon's version of Elendil reciting such an oath. They've made him too common, too prosaic to say something so poetic, too mundane to say something so epic. Becoming worthy of one's divine lineage, living up to the deeds of one's legendary ancestry, formed the foundation of the heroic ethos of the kings of Middle-earth. It was the first thing they thought of when entering battle, and the last thing they thought of as they died.
I go to my fathers, in whose mighty company I shall not now feel ashamed.
But they cannot make Elendil a character that lives up to the legend. For one thing, if he were a dominant and physically imposing Ubermensch, it would contradict the submissiveness he's forced to demonstrate whenever he interacts with the show's strong women. But also because the idea of reverence for the past, for one's ancestors,
long have I desired to look upon the kings of old, my kin,
is completely contrary to the worldview of the writers of the Rings of Power. It leads too easily to notions of shared ancestry or blood ties. It leads too easily to the words, our people.
I do not know what strength is in my blood, but I swear to you I will not let the White City fall. Nor our people fail. Our people. Our people.
You will not find a scene like this in the Rings of Power, where there are no distinct peoples, just multi-ethnic localities led by a strong woman of color. And to drive the point home, they double down on it, so that even families are subject to diversity quotas, and children bear no resemblance to their parents.
It's a seal, dude.
I might have known. You have the look of your father.
That's bait.
They have too secular and modern an outlook to comprehend the mythic, the heroic, or the numinous. So they have no idea how to portray a race of magic and spirit. And the only way that they can convey that their elves are elves is by their ears, which requires that they have short hair. The same applies to Galadriel. Her ethereal grace and her wisdom are gone. Instead, they attempt to convey strength by making her aggressive, threatening people with physical violence.
Then if blood be the price of passage, I will pay it. But one way or another, I will depart. I welcome you to try. I have no need of your welcome.
Which just makes her character weaker because it's an empty threat. The same as when she threatens to murder Elendil with her knife.
That would leave me little choice but to shout for your minders.
Suppose the words never manage to escape your throat.
As Ten Bears would say, there is no iron in her words of death. In the following scene, Josie Wales is just asking to be left alone, unlike Galadriel, who's demanding assistance. And yet the Confederate rebel does so with far more wisdom than the ancient elf from Valinor.
And you will die. I came here to die with you. Or live with you. I came here like this so you'll know my word of death is true. And that my word of life is then true. The sign of the Comanche. That will be on our lodge. That's my word of life. And your word of death? It's here in my pistols, there in your rifles. I'm here for either one.
There is iron in your words of death for all Comanche to see. And so there is iron in your words of life. No signed paper can hold the iron. It must come from men. The words of Ten Bears carries the same iron of life and death. It is good that warriors such as we meet in the struggle of life or death. It shall be life.
Diplomacy, honor, mutual respect between warriors.
You're a miracle! Your stories have none of that!
They've taken Tolkien's great enchanted garden and desacralized it. They try to replace what they have lost with sweeping drone shots and CGI. But you can only have so many new places to show in a series. So in their desperation to convey a sense of the epic, they force the signals of epicness onto scenes where it makes no sense. Like writing to a library, which comes across like parody. Apparently, you can just take any random scene and make it epic by adding slow motion and music. To illustrate how much thought Tolkien put into characters like Elendil, I want to go deeper into the lore, to show you
something that you have failed to see.
Elendil is a Noachian character, and Numenor is Tolkien's version of Atlantis, but it goes deeper than that. The Hindu version of Noah was Manu, the progenitor of mankind after the flood, and also the first king. He founded 2 dynasties of the Kshatriya, the Hindu warrior caste, the Solar Dynasty and the Lunar Dynasty. Buddha, for example, was a prince of the Solar Dynasty. Elendil's sons were Isildur and Anarion. Isildur means servant of the moon, and Anarion means son of the sun. They created twin cities in Middle-earth, Minas Ithil and Minas Anor, which mean the Tower of the Moon and the Tower of the Sun. Isildur and Anarion founded their houses, their dynasties, the Solar Dynasty and the Lunar Dynasty. Elendil's sword, the sword that cut the ring from Sauron's hand, was called Narsil, which means sun-moon. The sword of Elendil filled orcs and men with fear, for it shone with the light of the sun and of the moon, and it was named Narsil. Elendil's foundation of Middle-earth's solar and lunar dynasties isn't his only similarity to Manu. According to the esoteric movement called Theosophy, Manu was the Atlantean progenitor of the Aryan root race, which founded the City of the Sun and the City of the Bridge upon arrival to the mainland. Minas Anor, the City of the Sun, Minas Ithil, the City of the Moon, and Osgiliath, the City of the Bridge. But the meaning of Osgiliath is Citadel of the Stars. So we have the sun in the west, the moon in the east, and at the center, the stars. And Elendil actually means friend of the stars. Anarion, Isildur, Elendil, sun, moon, and stars. And this is not the only place in the lore where this celestial triad occurs, associated with the 3 principal elements of air, fire, and water, where air corresponds to the stars, fire to the sun, and water to the moon, just like the 3 elven rings of air, fire, and water. Consider the fate of the Silmarils. One of them becomes a star, one is burned in fire, and one is cast into the sea. And the Silmarils captured the light of the 2 trees, the solar tree and the lunar tree, which are traditional symbols of dominion. In these legends, the tree is often doubled, the tree of the sun and the tree of the moon. The tree of the sun and the tree of the moon are also hermetic symbols, sometimes producing crowns in the place of fruits. And the Silmarils were based on the Holy Grail, which is portrayed in some text as a heavenly stone of light, which burns the unworthy who try to grasp it, just like the Silmarils, and fell from the crown of Lucifer, just as a Silmaril was taken from Morgoth's crown. I could go on and on with this. Every mythological allusion leads to another in nested layers of meaning, and somehow, despite the variety of the sources, it all coheres. Tolkien embraced universal and timeless themes, like the quest for immortality. The cause of the Númenóreans' discontent was their desire to escape death, so they traveled to the west, to the island of the immortals, but failed in their quest. Just like Gilgamesh, the protagonist of humanity's oldest epic, written some 4,000 years ago. Gilgamesh, the one who has seen the deep, who sought immortality by following the path of the sun, into the west, crossing over the impassable sea to arrive at the island of the immortal, but ultimately failing in his quest. Amazon removes this timeless theme of life and death, and instead explains the discontent of the Númenóreans with this.
Elf workers taking your trades. Workers who don't sleep.
Ham-fisted political allegory. They replace the universal with the parochial. They replace the timeless with the current year. Trying to produce something Tolkienian with a room full of Hollywood writers is like trying to counterfeit $100 bills with crayons. They lack both the breadth and the depth of Tolkien, the vast scope of his vision, and his attention to detail. There are so many layers in his work, so much to explore. Gilgamesh, Beowulf, the Grail Cycle, Theosophy, Hermeticism, Hinduism, Atlantis, and so much more.
He knows more than you can imagine.
And yet the Amazon showrunners think that because they binge a lot of Netflix, they are qualified to write the novel that Tolkien never wrote.
But I got a news flash for you, Walter Cronkite. You aren't.